Chapter 1. Into the Thicket. Ring-a-ring-o ashes, pockets full of screams, hush-husha, we all tumble down. The words, warped and woven into a chilling lilt, escaped the lips of Ethan as he stood at the forest's edge. His voice trembled, mingling with the twilight hues that seemed to drain the day of its color. The mist curled like ghostly fingers through the trees, pulling at the edges of reality. Beside him, Jess pressed her lips into a thin line, her silence as heavy as the damp air that shrouded them. Mark rubbed his arms vigorously. Anxiety crept into his movements like the cold, insistent and unrelenting. A small shiver danced across Lily's spine, her body mirroring the trembling leaves above. The haunted look in Clara's eyes seemed to pierce through the gathering dusk, sensing more than what lay before them. And there it was, the ancient tree, knotted and gnarled, as if it bore the weight of centuries. Carved with care, yet grotesque in meaning, a riddle presented itself on its time-worn bark. For those who dare to enter, to play my little game, your fears in wood are splintered. Guess right or take the blame. The silent pause that followed was broken only by their breathing and the distant, mournful cries that could have been wind or something else entirely. With each step into the forest, their presence felt like an intrusion. The silence grew denser, as if absorbing their fears. A twig snapped underfoot, an echo of bone against stone, and Lily flinched at every sound. Their journey wove through fog that clung like cobwebs. The chill in the air bit at their skin, while fleeting glimpses of white eyes seemed to watch from the shrouded undergrowth. At a forked path, indecision snaked through them, to split or stay together. The tension grew, their unity frayed at the edges like well-worn cloth. Then came Daniel's cry, a startled shout that ended abruptly as he vanished into a concealed pitfall after murmuring an answer to another riddle that floated on the air. In shadow's keep and night's embrace, I take what's due without a trace. Their circle had broken. Fear became a living thing among them. Ethan called out, his voice edging towards panic. Jess scanned the shadows as if they would leap to life. Mark's accusations flew wildly. Lily clutched her arms tighter still. They were no longer just friends in a forest. They were trespassers in a realm where even whispers seemed too loud and every choice could be their last. Their friend had been swallowed by shadows, with only echoing silence as an answer to their desperate calls. Ethan's hand closed over a gnarly root for support. Jess peered into the darkness where Daniel had been. Lily's breaths came in short gasps, and Clara's eyes searched for something, anything that might mean this was just a nightmare. But nightmares were dreams, and this was all too real. Chapter 2. The Hunted. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? The rhyme twisted through the air, mocking the four who remained. Underneath the canopy of gnarled branches, suspicion curled around them like the vines that twisted up the tree trunks. Ethan's breath came in short bursts, fogging in the chill air as he eyed his companions. We can't just stand here, he said, his voice betraying a quiver he couldn't control. Maybe one of us is making these things happen, Jess said, her voice a soft but dangerous whisper that seemed to suggest more than mere words. Mark ran a hand through his hair, glancing at each of them through a haze of anxiety. That's crazy talk, he countered. We're all in this. But his words choked off as the group stumbled upon a clearing. The sight before them would haunt their dreams forever. An ancient tree stood in the center, its bark twisted into grotesque shapes. Hanging from its boughs were fruits unlike any they had ever seen, fruits with faces contorted with expressions of sheer terror. Lily's hand trembled as she reached for one of the fruits. Her curiosity was her downfall. With a single bite, her scream pierced the night. The fruit fell from her hand as her eyes went wide with an unspeakable horror only she could see, images summoned from the darkest corners of her mind. At that moment, fleeting shadows danced between the trees, beings with gingerbread faces and hollow eyes that glimmered in and out of existence. Ethan called out to them, but was met with silence as they vanished like smoke in a breeze. The group pressed on until they found themselves at the threshold of an abandoned cabin. The door hung open like a gaping mouth waiting to swallow them whole. Inside, ghostly photographs lined the walls, a grim gallery of those who had wandered here before and never left. Clara's eyes wandered over each image until a familiar voice snaked through the cracks in the floorboards. "Clara?" It beckoned with an eerie sweetness that sent shivers down her spine. She followed it to a corner of the cabin where an ornate mirror hung crookedly. Her reflection was not her own. Instead, she saw myriad reflections of herself, each more twisted and disturbing than the last. As Clara reached out to touch the glass, she vanished from sight, leaving only a ripple across its surface, a chilling echo of her presence. The cabin groaned as if mourning Clara's disappearance. Mark backed away from where she had been standing mere moments ago. "We need to get out," he stammered. Jess nodded silently, her gaze locked on the spot where Clara had vanished, while Lily clutched herself as if trying to hold together the pieces of her sanity. Without another word between them, they exited into the cold embrace of the night. The gingerbread-faced specters watched from behind shadowy veils as whispers carried through the trees. They were hunters in this game, a game where trust had unraveled and fear had sown its seeds deep within their hearts. As they trudged forward through dense underbrush and over twisted roots that clawed at their feet like hands desperate for freedom, they understood one thing. They were no longer just lost in this forest. They were being hunted. Chapter 3: The Shifting Maze. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Not all the king's horses, nor all the king's men, could lead him back through the forest again. The remnants of daylight slipped away like sand through their fingers, and in its place, a chilling moon ascended, casting an eerie glow over the gingerbread forest. Ethan, his every breath now a puff of white in the cold air, led the way. Mark followed close, his eyes darting to every shadow as if it might spring to life. The forest had become a creature itself, a breathing, seething entity with paths that twisted and turned like writhing snakes. Trees, once silent sentinels, now seemed to sway toward them with sinister intent. The ground itself felt alive underfoot, with each step sinking slightly as though walking on the soft belly of a slumbering beast. As they journeyed deeper into the labyrinthine woods, an unearthly pond emerged from the mist. Its surface was a mirror not to their own faces, but to lost souls that hovered just beneath, their eyes pleading for help or perhaps warning of perils yet unseen. Mark reached out tentatively, his fingertips grazing the water's surface, and the faces rippled into nothingness. "Can you hear that?" Ethan whispered suddenly. From a distance came the sound of singing, a mournful lullaby that wound its way through the trees. The tune was hauntingly familiar, yet sorrowfully twisted. Mark's eyelids grew heavy, as if the song pulled him into a deepening trance. He collapsed into a pile of autumn leaves that seemed to form just for him, his body instantly motionless as if in a death-like sleep. Ethan shook him, panic edging into his voice. "Mark, wake up!" But Mark remained still as stone, his chest barely rising and falling. The fog around them grew denser, coiling around their legs like living things. Ethan's efforts to maintain control faltered. He spun around, searching for clarity in a world that no longer made sense, a maze that shifted and mocked with each passing second. "Mark is gone," Lily's voice trembled from somewhere within the fog. She was close enough for Ethan to hear, but impossible to see. Silence fell heavy again until the ground shuddered and cracked open like a monstrous mouth. Lily's scream pierced the night as she fell through the earth's jagged teeth. Ethan lunged toward where her voice had been seconds before and found only darkness waiting. He was alone now, the forest's cruel game isolating its prey before delivering a final blow. His leadership, the very thing that held the fragments of their group together, buckled under the weight of his fears. "Where are you?" he called into the void. But only silence answered back, as heavy and suffocating as the fog that enshrouded him. Somewhere within this shifting maze lay an exit, or perhaps their end, a riddle unsolved by minds unhinged by terror. The forest held its breath, waiting for Ethan's next move in their deadly game of hide-and-seek. Chapter 4: No Escape. "Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow?" The question hung in the air, loaded with malice, as Ethan and Jess found themselves in the forest's heart. Before them, an ancient altar stood, a circle of gingerbread statues surrounding it, like silent guards to a forgotten realm. The air was thick with whispers that scratched at the edges of sanity. The statues, grotesque parodies of gingerbread men with hollow eyes and twisted smiles, spoke of desolation. Each held a riddle, a promise of freedom, or an eternity trapped within these cursed woods. One by one, Jess approached the statues. Her mind raced as the whispers grew into a cacophony. She could almost feel fingers of sound clawing at her thoughts. Then she heard it, a riddle that seemed to pierce through the noise like a beacon. What demands an answer, but asks no question? Her voice quivered as she spoke the answer. A telephone. The ground beneath her shuddered, as if approving her answer. But as she exhaled in relief, the earth cracked open like a gaping maw and swallowed her whole. A scream escaped her lips before she disappeared into the abyss, leaving Ethan alone with the silent and smirking gingerbread figures. Panic surged through Ethan's veins as he stumbled backward. The gingerbread specters began their pursuit, their sugar-spun limbs cracking with each unnatural stride. He ran through the forest, dodging gnarled roots and low-hanging branches that seemed to reach out for him with skeletal fingers. The moonlight cast ghastly shadows that danced alongside him, twining with his fear. His heart hammered against his chest as he felt the almost touch of the specter's icing-coated hands grazing his back. Ethan's flight led him in torturous circles until he collapsed at the altar once more. The forest had toyed with him, guiding him back to where despair had begun. Gasping for air and shaking uncontrollably, he looked up at the mocking faces of his sugary tormentors. Through gritted teeth, Ethan addressed the altar directly. "I know your games," he declared in defiance. "I see your paths of torment. Release me from this nightmare." But the forest absorbed his words without response. A blanket of silence smothered his plea as if it were nothing but a child's whisper against a thunderstorm. As dawn unfurled its light across the sky, an eerie calm settled over the clearing where Ethan had made his last stand. All that remained was a chilling stillness and a question hanging in the cool morning air. Can anyone unravel these riddles before they fall prey to time, or to something far more sinister within the gingerbread forest?
Ladies and gentlemen, the silence that now envelops us is as profound as the secrets within the gingerbread forest. I extend my deepest gratitude for letting your imaginations wander through the twisted paths and riddles with our contestants. Your presence has been the light in the dark thicket we ventured together. If the whispers of the forest have left you cold with curiosity, or if the gingerbread-faced specters have found a home in the shadows of your mind, then do not let this journey end here. I implore you, like and subscribe, for there are countless more mysteries to unravel and endless dark corners of our world to explore. Remember, every like strengthens the will of our last contestant still trapped within the forest's roots. Every subscription ensures that no story goes untold. So be brave, join us again, and let us delve once more into the unknown. Until then, listen closely to the whispers of your own fears. Perhaps they hold the riddles you need to solve before it's too late. Thank you, brave listeners. Sleep well, if you can.